If you're making a game, chances are you're actually not an artist, which is completely fine. Not everybody needs to be an artist, but at some point you will need some graphics, some sprites for your game, and you will wonder, where do I get them? How do you make art for your game when you suck as an artist? Well, and now guess why I've been thinking about this question. Now let's take a step back, okay? Because I designed this to look crappy. This is a game I'm working on at the moment, Will You Snail. It's a rage game, and I wanted to have a pretty crappy look, but not exactly this kind of crappy, okay? So here's problem number one. You need to figure out what you want. For example, I want it to look crappy, but not this kind of crappy. What does that mean? If you want to design something, you need to know what your goals are. Which feelings do you want to evoke? Which associations? What's your game art supposed to communicate to the player? I think a mistake a lot of art noobs, myself included, make is we don't think enough about those kinds of questions. Guess I'm doing this way too late, but what do I actually want to get out of the art style for Will You Snail? In this case, I just want this game to go as viral as possible, so what I care most about is it needs to stand out, it needs to look crazy, it needs to be memorable, and it needs to look super interesting on screenshots so people get interested and click on it. On top of that, it would be really cool if it would help me to communicate the main selling point of this game, which is the artificial intelligence that tries to predict your movement and tries to destroy you.
I'm too smart for you, give up.
Now step number 2 is trying to figure out how you get what you want. This step, however, only makes sense when you know exactly what you want. Now's also the time to think about the question, do you actually want to create the graphics for your video game yourself? Do you want to hire an artist? Do you want to download sprites and graphics from the asset store? The problem is obviously hiring an artist is super expensive, and exclusively using sounds and sprites and 3D models from the internet is kind of unoriginal. That's why I want to make the graphics for my game myself, and that's what this video is all about. So now that we're fully prepared, let's ask the question one more time. How do you create the graphics for your game when you suck as an artist, when you are just really bad at drawing, and when you're just really bad with colors? Now please correct me if you think I'm wrong or if you have a different idea, but I think the best way to handle that sort of situation is just to experiment. And to experiment as efficiently as possible. There's one thing you simply cannot do when you're not a professional artist, and that is coming up with the perfect art style from scratch. Just like that, first try, bloop. That simply doesn't work. But there's one thing you can do, however, and that is looking at 2 different experiments and telling which one of them brings you closer to your design goals. When you just have 2 screenshots side by side, you will be able to tell which one of them you like better, right? Just imagine you repeat this process hundreds of times. Of course your result's gonna get better. You probably agree, but you probably also think, I don't have that much time. So the new question we need to worry about is, how do we make experimenting as efficient as possible? Because the more experiments we can make, the higher the chance of finding something that actually works. Now, what's the fastest way to run a lot of experiments for your game art? The workflow that's best for you depends entirely on which kind of game you're making. Maybe the fastest way is to do a mock-up in Photoshop. If you make a 3D game, create a mock-up in Blender. Whatever is the fastest way is the best way and the one you should use. Here's a little trick I used for Will You Snail, and if you have the chance to do so, I highly recommend you try this as well. First of all, I run most of my experiments directly in engine, because of what help is a mockup if you can't reproduce the same style in-game. Running your art experiments directly in-game in engine makes sure the style is actually something you can technically do. Secondly, if you're not an artist, chances are you're at the very least familiar with programming. And let me tell you, programming can be very useful if you're looking for efficiency. For example, for Will You Snail, I simply wrote a little script that randomly chooses the colors of the walls, of the snail, of the background, of the outlines. And then another little script that just places a couple of objects randomly in the background, which generates these somewhat random backgrounds you can see here. All I need to do now is wait for a color scheme and a background I like, and go with that. Here you can see a color scheme that really stood out to me and that I wanted to run further design experiments on. It's certainly not super pleasant to look at, but it fits to my design goals relatively well. So I just took a screenshot, opened it in Photoshop, but you can also use GIMP or Paint. Then just copy the colors over to your game, et voila, now you can keep experimenting with that. What I wanted to try next is different outlines for the walls. So I created like 7 or 9 different outlines for them and wrote a script that randomly switches between them with different animation speeds and all that sort of stuff, which once again just helps me to experiment faster. And then obviously, after a while, I found an outline that I liked. Now I just keep experimenting with that one, because I still need to decide on a background, on some patterns in the foreground maybe. There's still a lot of other design decisions, but I think I'm slowly getting forward with this method. And yes, you might never quite reach the speed of a professional artist, but at the very least you can get somewhere with this. Or can you? Because what if you're not sure which one of your experiments works best? What if all of them look stupid? And what if you took the wrong decision? What if you spent a ton of time on one style and then figure out the one you had earlier was already way better and you wasted a bunch of time? All of that can happen, and the only thing you can do about it is get feedback from others. Judging your own work subjectively is really hard, so try to find some people who know what they're talking about and ask for their opinion. Especially if you can show people different experiments, different versions of your style, they will probably be able to give you very good and clear feedback. Maybe you remember how I created the art styles for Ovis Nova. I basically did a little experiment where I created 4 art styles in 4 days, which also was an awesome workflow. I can highly recommend you try this. Because 4 days is not a huge time commitment for something that gives you that much value. I mean, you can obviously check those videos out if you're interested how I created those styles. But the main point I'm trying to get at here is, I believe in experimentation. Make experimentation as quick and as efficient as possible. Then run 100 experiments, compare them, ask others for feedback, ask others for their opinion. By the way, I'm also pretty curious which one of the Will You Snail styles you liked best. Is this a good direction for reaching my design goals? Or should I go back to this? Also, how do you go about creating the art for your game? This is Jonas and I document the entire journey to becoming a game developer. If you liked this video, hit the subscribe button, or the like button, whatever. It's appreciated, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.